This morning, we are going to start off continuing our way through the book of Genesis, and in particular with the introduction of a man known as Abram, or Abraham. I want to start reading in chapter 11, verse 10. Let me pray for us as we get ready to begin. Father, your word is a lamp unto our feet and a light to our path. May we hide your words in our hearts so that we will not sin against you. That, Father, your word would give us life, would teach us the ways we're supposed to live and conduct ourselves, would encourage us, and help build us more into the image of your Son. I pray that as we read your word now, that your Spirit would just carry it along and apply it to our hearts, that, Father, you would teach us how we may walk with you more faithfully. Pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Genesis chapter 11, starting in verse 10. These are the family records of Shem. If you remember, there were three sons of Noah, Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Ham was the one that came in and disgraced his father, whereas Shem is the one that is blessed. And so Shem starts to give us the kind of lineage of righteousness continuing. You remember, as we've gone through Genesis, typically when the genealogies pop up, it's to kind of show us the impact of a person's choices on the generations after them. We can get focused on small micro moments and the impact that happens in instances sometimes and forget the lingering and lasting effects that our choices have. Well, Shem, being a righteous person, we read of his record. These are the family records of Shem. Shem lived 100 years and fathered Arpachshad. I even practiced this. 2 years after the flood. After he fathered Arpachshad, Shem lived 500 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Arpachshad lived 35 years and fathered Shelah. After he fathered Shelah, Arpachshad lived 403 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Shelah lived 30 years and fathered Eber. After he fathered Eber, Shelah lived 403 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Eber lived 34 years and fathered Peleg. After he fathered Peleg, Eber lived 430 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Peleg lived 30 years and fathered Reu. After he fathered Reu, Peleg lived 209 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Reu lived 32 years and fathered Serug. After he fathered Serug, Reu lived 207 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Serug lived 30 years and fathered Nahor. After he fathered Nahor, Serug lived 200 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Nahor lived 29 years and fathered Terah. After he fathered Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and fathered other sons and daughters. Terah lived 70 years and fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. These are the family records of Terah. Terah fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in his native land in Ur of the Chaldeans during his father Terah's lifetime. Abram and Nahor took wives. Abram's wife was Sarai, and Nahor's wife was named Milcah. She was the daughter of Haran and the father of both Milcah and Ishka. Sarai was unable to conceive, and she did not have a child. Terah took his son Abram, his grandson Lot, Haran's son, and his daughter-in-law Sarai, and his son Abram's wife, and they set out together from Ur of the Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. Terah lived 205 years and died in Haran. And the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your land, your relatives, your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who treat you with contempt. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, and as the Lord told him, and as Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, I'm missing a couple verses. Let me pull it up really quick. Sorry for this. This is not typical. But we're going to verse 6. Abram passed through the land to the side of Shechem at the oak of Moreh, and at the time the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." And so he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. And from there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And he built an altar to the Lord there, and he called on the name of the Lord. You see, what's interesting to me as I was getting ready to teach this passage is when you look at the Tower of Babel, you see them coming together and having this aspiration. Let us make a name for ourselves. I mean, you think about, remember this, we recognize pride, ambition, they exalt in themselves. They come together to build a city. They're utilizing their resources to try to actually run away from the call that God has placed on humans to spread out and multiply and fill the earth. And so they come together and they have that charge, that ambition, let us make our name great. What's interesting to me, though, is that when I read that, my initial thought can be that the human pride or arrogance of wanting our name to be great is wrong. But yet look at the promise that God makes to Abram. The very thing that they were seeking at the Tower of Babel is actually what God promises Abram. I will make your name great. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. You see, when we think about what it means to actually be someone who's walking with our God, there can be a lot of times that I've seen Christians that go to the opposite side of the Tower of Babel. It's the Tower of Babel, representing pride, ambition, self-exaltation. And sometimes Christians can actually go to the other side of being content with mediocrity. You see, but that's not actually what God calls Abram to. Abram doesn't call God and say, come to me and walk with me, and you're going to be a nobody. You're not going to do great things. You're not going to be powerful. Instead, he says, no, as you walk with me, understand I'm going to make your name great. The very thing that they sought at the Tower of Babel, I will hand to you. But there's a distinct difference. You see, God does not call us to pride, but God, when he calls each one of us and designed each and every one of us, also did not call us to mediocrity and passivity. He didn't call me and you to just be okay. You know, we use the phrase a lot of times that we're called to faithfulness, not to results. Have you heard that? It's about you being faithful. It's not about the results. And that sentiment is something we need to really hold on to. The results are when the results become the problem is when they become demands on our part. God, if I do these things, you owe blank to me. But you know what? Jesus also, when he was speaking about his disciples, didn't say they were just going to give it their best effort and then kind of the results are going to be floundering. He said things like when he described the different soils, about the fruit that comes from them. You'll know a tree by its fruit. He talks about his disciples and says they're going to do greater things than even I have done. You see, Jesus and our God is not exalted by us when we flounder and do things halfway. When we just pass into oblivion. When we don't strive to do things excellently for him. God isn't okay with a halfway attempt. He doesn't become greater known and more exalted in the earth when his followers are not known for actually achieving and doing things with excellence. You see, God calling us to faithfulness is not just calling us to just kind of have a half-hearted belief in him and then just continue about with however we want to pursue life. God calls us to follow him, to trust him, to strive after him in obedience. And this is what we see with Abram. Abram is someone that God chooses. He's not chosen because he has all of these great metrics that God should look at him and be like, that's the guy that's going to get the job done. He's coming from the land of Ur, which was a central hub of pagan idolatry in Abram's time. It's also, he's married to a woman who can't bear children. And yet God's making this promise of he's going to make his name great and he's going to bless him to become a great nation. Abram's not chose because of his metrics, but he's certainly not called into obscurity. You see, one of the early church fathers or church pastors that was really influential in the first couple of hundred years after Jesus, named Irenaeus, said this: "The glory of God is a human being fully alive." And we may think about that and say, but really, isn't the glory of God something that's supposed to be departed from us? You know, we see God independently. We think of him as glorious separately from humanity. Are we making too much of humans if we try to say that God's glory is displayed in human beings living fully? Brothers and sisters, how do we know and see God's glory but in his creation? You go and you see it in a sunset. You see it in a waterfall. You hear it in nature. We go there and we understand when we see God's creation beautiful and magnified, when we see the stars at night, and we see this is what he was able to make. This is what he's able to accomplish. Don't we then turn and glorify our God? Well, brothers and sisters, what is the crowning achievement of his creation? The thing in which when he finishes creating in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, the story ends when he sees humanity created and says, it is very good. What was the thing in which Satan came to strike down and to tempt away? It wasn't the fish in the sea. He brought the most dishonor and stripped the most glory from the God he hated by causing humans to fall. So how could it not be that our God is most glorified when those humans are being restored and redeemed? You see, in this, God is not scared of humans becoming too great. I mean, the story of the Tower of Babel. You remember? Let us build a tower with the heights in the heavens, and God has to stoop down to even see it. Our greatest achievements don't even come close to him and who he is. But as those made in his image, when we do accomplish great things, not for the sake of exalting ourselves, as was at the heart of the Tower of Babel, our God is also glorified. People should not look at Christians who are accomplishing great things and say, wow, that person is great, and end of story. But as we go out into our fields, our occupations, wherever God has us, and we thrive and we succeed and we become a blessing to others, guess what? Our God is glorified. That's why he's not afraid to make this promise to Abram that, hey, what the people at the Tower of Babel were trying to accomplish of making their name great, I'm going to give that to you. And I will bless you. And I will make you into a great nation. And I will cause your name to be great. Our God is not afraid of humans becoming too much. In fact, when we serve him well, when we accomplish great things on behalf of our God is extremely glorified by that. It is a witness and a testimony to the world that our God is real, that his ways change things. We see this in how he chooses Abram. It's not because Abram merits it or earned it. In fact, what we see is that through grace, through grace, God makes us into a blessing. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your land, your relatives, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse anyone who treats you with contempt. And all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." 5 times God says, "I will." This isn't an action that Abram sought out. In fact, it very much seems like, remember, from the land of Ur, pagan idolatry. This is like a capital of this. It seems like God is calling Abram out of a lifestyle. I mean, we see this in Joshua 24. Joshua said to all the people, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River and worshipped other gods." He did not choose Abram because he figured everything out and was doing it well. He was worshiping other gods. He's an idolater, disqualified. This isn't the prime candidate if we're going out and looking for someone. But God, in His grace, chose him. Chose him, a man married to a woman that could not have children, to build into a great nation. Now, Abram, as we're going to see over the coming weeks, is a man that has a very colorful story. There are times he's called the father of faith. In Galatians, we're told that those who are true followers, are true inheritors of Abraham's blessing, his promise, are those who share his faith. He's set up for us as a hero of the faith in Hebrews chapter 11. Yet we're going to see a man who struggled with doubts, who questioned God, who fled when he shouldn't have. And yet, all throughout his story, a consistent theme is this: even when he was making mistakes, God showed up with grace to intervene, to protect the promise that he had made to Abram. You see, if the hope that you and I had in our salvation was God saved us, but then we don't need to screw it up or lose it, the father of faith serves as a great example of someone who himself couldn't do that. To have faith that's unwavering, I don't know anyone who does. We go through difficult times. Our faith is tested, as James talks about. And this testing of our faith produces the endurance. It produces the perseverance, but it's not there inherently. The faith we have as a child is not the same faith that we have when we grow up at the end of our life. And Abram is an example of that. A man who is sustained by God's grace through the wavering of his faith. He's not chosen because he's a perfect example, and he does not endure because he's a perfect example. He is chosen and his faith stays because God has grace in choosing him. And God says, "I will make you a blessing." This faith and this choosing of Abram is going to wind up blessing all peoples of the earth. He says, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who treat you with contempt, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you." I mean, think about this. 4,000 years later, we're sitting on a different continent, speaking a language that didn't even exist, reading on magical screens that display things that he could have never imagined. And all the nations of the earth are being blessed through God choosing and making this promise to Abram. All the people of the earth are hearing of this man's faith and the promise and how God chose him. And then as a result, later on, that promise coming to fulfillment in Jesus Christ himself, the man who ultimately would display faith perfectly lived out, who would be a descendant of Abraham, Ephesians says this about him. For he, talking about the Father, chose us in him, the Son. What's the basis for our God choosing us to save us? There had to be someone that was holy. There had to be someone that earned the relationship and the privilege of being in God's presence. It wasn't us. We can't achieve perfection in this life. We strive for it. We strive to walk in holiness. We strive to be righteous in this life. Not because we have to earn it, for our relationship with God is based in grace. That Christ himself stood in our place and that earned our righteousness for us. We strive for holiness. We're not content with living how we always have. We kill the old man so that the new man may be raised to life. We do this, though, not because we have to earn the place with God. But he chose us in him before the foundation of the world to be holy and blameless in love before him. He predestined us to be adopted as sons through Jesus Christ for himself. Why? According to the good pleasure of his will. He delighted in redeeming us and saving us. Peter tells us that Jesus, for the joy set before him, endured the cross. And what was that joy? Your soul, my soul, our very lives, that we would be saved. He found joy in knowing that you and I would not be condemned to our sin and to the death and destruction that it brings, but instead would be liberated to follow him and shaped into his image. That we would be transformed into a blessing to all the peoples that we interact with. Why did he do this? To the praise of his glorious grace. A gift that was given to those who did not deserve it, that he has lavished on us in the beloved one, his Son. You see, we are chosen by grace, but we're not chosen and then just left as we are. We're not called to follow God just to get out of jail, to get out of hell, so that then we have this rubber stamp on our passport that says I'm going to heaven and not going to hell, and we just live our lives however we want to from that point on. We are called, as it says, to be holy and to be blameless. There's a change, a transformation that comes for those who believe, and that's the second part I want us to see, is that through faith, we walk in obedience and receive the blessing. Both of these things are held in tension in this passage. God makes the promise. God says, I will. But God did not come down and like a puppet start making Abram walk to the land of Canaan. Instead, what we read in verse 4 is that so Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. Guys, he's traveling on foot with livestock and a host of people through the Middle East. This isn't a small journey or insignificant. This is a man who probably was not expecting God to step in and call him to anything great. But yet God is calling him to pursue him. And Abram acts obediently. And he took his wife Sarai and his nephew Lot and all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out from the land of Canaan. And when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the site of Shechem at the oak of Moreh at the time that the Canaanites were in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. Remember, he is married to a woman who cannot have children. Not only that, they're both like 75 years old. How many of you are planning on having your next child at 75? Well, they didn't even. They had it at 100, as we're going to find out. But this is God stepping in. I'm going to give you this land. And The promise, in order for it to be fulfilled, there is no way it happens other than supernatural intervention of God. But there's no way it happens if Abram didn't go. Both of those are true in this. And so Abram built an altar to the Lord who appeared to him there. And from there he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent. Bethel means house of God. And with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east, he built an altar to the Lord there, and he called on the name of the Lord. Remember this phrase? It's been popping up over and over throughout Genesis, those who call on the name of the Lord. It's the idea of us saying, this is who my God is, and I take refuge in him. It's not adding in Jesus' name at the end of a prayer, and all of a sudden, God's got to give you this request. It's saying, this is who my God is. This is what he teaches me. This is his character. This is what he stands for, and this is what he stands against. And I hide myself in that. I become just enmeshed in that. I soak it in. I want it to transform me. I want to be what I know my God is. I want to be like him. And Abram does that. We see this transformation of faith as he starts to walk in obedience. And as he obeys God and follows him, God gives him a promise that is only going to come true if he is obedient and if God acts supernaturally. Brothers and sisters, this is the way that our faith operates on a daily basis. We are all chosen by God's grace, not because we earned it. And God promises to bless us, to be for us, to help to give us a future, that he would restore us and he would transform us. But brothers and sisters, we can also be inhibitors to receiving those blessings from God by choosing disobedience rather than obedience. We can be those who, though God would love to lavish us with his gifts and to transform us, halt or diminish or inhibit that from actually occurring through not choosing to walk with our God, through not choosing to hide ourselves in him, to call on his name, as Abram says. We have the possibility of hindering this way of us growing closer to our God. And notice this, when Abram does this, it's extraordinarily costly for him. He leaves behind family, security, his identity. He leaves behind his inheritance. He goes with his people, and he goes to a land that he's never been to settle in a place that's inhabited by other people at the time. But because he obeys, we sit here today. If you want to see the fruit of him choosing to believe his God and to walk in faith, it's the fact that you and I sit here in this faith today. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a pastor in Nazi Germany. He was there and really pushing back against Hitler and a lot of the ways that he saw the church compromising during the time that the Holocaust was going on and the World War. And as he's pushing back, something for which he would ultimately give his life in a concentration camp, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he writes a book called The Cost of Discipleship. And he talks about how the concept of a cheap grace versus the costly grace. He says this: if we really value God's grace, his gift to us of salvation, we don't have to purchase it, but it doesn't come without cost. God doesn't give you salvation and demand nothing in return. God doesn't give you salvation and say, now live your life however you want to. God gives salvation, and then he expects us to take up our cross daily and follow him. God gives us salvation, but before we receive it, we hear the words of Jesus who says, count the cost of following me. God gives us salvation and expects us to then return with joy, acts of obedience in pursuing and loving our God. To become more and more transformed through the power of His Spirit into the image of His Son. That like how God promised to Abram, I will bless you, and I will make you a blessing that overflows to all the peoples of the earth. So we, when we follow Christ and walk in obedience, become those who overflow. We start to look like Jesus and sound like Jesus, and people get to see that. And they start to see that this gospel we are proclaiming is truly good news that really transforms, that makes a difference. It's not fruitless. It's not fluff. It really works. Because they're able to look at you and say, you used to be like this, and now you're like this. I look at the world and what the people around us all say they believe, and I see how they live their life and the conflict and the turmoil and the way that they just don't have peace. And I look at you, and even in the middle of circumstances, like having to abandon all of your family and leave and go to a land that you don't know, where all of the circumstances would say that he should not have peace and he should not be secure. And yet Abram goes, and as he does, he is secure in his God. He takes refuge in his God. His obedience leads him to a place of peace and security and prosperity. God made us to walk in this tension, that our God is sovereign, and he chooses us, and he loves us, not because we've earned it, yet we also are made to walk with him. It is a relationship. Think about it like this. It's the difference between when you get a gift on Christmas from someone who's showing up at a party you're at and they're giving it out of obligation. You ever had to take that kind of gift? How much thought goes into it? I get like a gift card or just some cash. If I don't know the person, I'm not close to them, but I have to give some kind of gift, I give it and then I leave. And I have no relationship with that person. That's very different from people who I care about, who I look through the things that I know they like. And I'm intentional about it. And I give knowing that there's a continual relationship. God gave us this gift out of a deep love and choosing us. Not because he wanted to just drop us a gift and then have no relationship with us. But because that gift was the start, the catalyst, the transformation that then allowed us to start walking with him. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, this is what he says. He's combating this idea of cheap grace that's happening in Nazi Germany. He's combating how what he sees are Christians who actually don't want to choose to do the hard things to follow Jesus. They're willing to make compromise after compromise after compromise, and they're not walking in obedience to what his word and his ways teach. And he says this, only he who believes is obedient, and only he who is obedient believes. It sounds much like the words of our Savior that we studied in John, where he said, those who love me will keep my commandments. To say that I love Jesus, but I don't want to walk according to his ways is a contradiction that God's word just does not allow. God calls us to follow him. We even see later on God recognizing this. In Genesis 15, we read that Abram believed the Lord and he credited it to him as righteousness. Abram believed. Abram acted. Abram chose obedience. And God acted supernaturally to give him a righteousness that was not of his own. These two things are in tension and work together. And what was the result of this? You know that imagery I kept telling us all throughout Genesis? Those who dwell in cities are represented usually as those who are trying to take security in their own measures to protect themselves. It's usually the wicked that are gathering in cities. Well, we read a shift. From there, he moved on to the hill country east of Bethel and pitched his tent. Then he builds an altar and he calls on the name of the Lord. Here's the result of Abram choosing obedience. Okay? I'll give you a scenario. I want you to go home and pack your things. And I want you to I'm going to drop a GPS marker in some random place in Columbus. And I want you to go there with a tent. And I want you to just live in the tent. And I want you to trust me that I'm going to make sure you're okay. No locks, no doors, no walls, no fence. Do you realize it's exactly what God did to Abram? Abram, I'm going to send you to a land that you've never been to, and you're going to take all of your possessions and your family and everybody you're responsible for, and you're going to have no city there to your name. Instead, you're going to go there and you're going to live in a tent. And the rest of Abram's life, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all three, all only ever live in tent cities. There's no walls to protect them. There's no security that's brought by security measures. You know what secures them? They have found their shelter and their residence in the presence of their God. And he makes sure they dwell securely. We read this in Psalm 18. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my rock where I seek refuge. My shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. You know what? When you read about the Israelites, when they finally come in to inherit the land, what's the first thing that happens? The story of Jericho. That imagery that we're talking about of cities being this idea of human security, that I can build a place where I don't have to depend on God. I can build a place where I have security myself. The conquest of Israel, of the land of Canaan, starts with God saying, you know, all of these humans that have followed in the line of Cain, who have found ways to try to build security for themselves, well, you're going to go to one of the greatest fortified cities that they've built, and you're going to walk around it. Just walk. And then you're going to blow a trumpet, and you're going to shout. And if you've seen the story of VeggieTales, like up there mocking, what are you going to do? Like, we got these great walls. What are you going to do? And all of human ingenuity of building a way that they did not have to depend on God for their security, that they didn't have to depend on his ways, but they can choose to do whatever they want, come crumbling down in an instant. We're going to see this pop up again in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. We're going to see this happen over and over. But you know what happens every time somebody comes into the tent city that Abram is in? They find peace. They find security. Why? Because their God was their stronghold. Because oftentimes doing things God's way seems very counterintuitive to our own security and provision. Have you noticed that? I was meeting with a pastor this past week, and we were talking about he had adopted a child, and he was telling me about the process of them raising money for the adoption. And he also is someone that was working at a high corporate level in Chick-fil-A, making six figures, and he left that to come be a pastor at a church in our area. I'm talking with him about it. He was like, huge pay cut. Churches don't pay like Chick-fil-A does. And he was talking about that, and he was like, you know, it makes 0 sense financially for me to give 10% of my money to the church. And he said, you know, but I was thinking about it, and every time that I had this bill that needs to be paid, and I need to send my tithe check, and I chose, I'm going to pay this bill, I always was just scraping by. And every time I had this bill that needs to be paid in my tithe check, and I chose I'm going to send my tithe check, somehow the bill still got paid. And that's a financial example, but this happens in so many other ways. Every time you think you're at the end of your emotional capacity and that person comes along that's struggling and you know God's put them in your life to minister to them, and you think, I'm at my wit's end. Like, I need them to counsel me. Like, I don't have what it takes in this moment. Every time that you give into that and you pull away, I know I have. What I often found was that I was just as emotionally drained as I ever was. But every time I went into that and I said, God, I know you put them here. Help me to love them. Help me to care for them in this moment. I've always found that somehow it almost felt like I had more capacity at the end of ministering to them because my God was with me. Whether it's that, whether it's doing what's right, you think if I do this that I know is right and honorable, the circumstances say that I'm actually going to wind up in the negative for this. I'm going to lose something. And how many times have you found that when you chose obedience, rather than finding some crafty or ingenuitive way to get around obedience, to try to protect yourself, but when you say, God, this is right, and I'm going to trust you in this, and I'm going to walk with you. How many of you have ever found that God didn't provide for you in that moment? Or that you weren't secure? You see, what walls and cities gave was this fictional belief that because we build walls, all of a sudden our cities are secure. We're secure. We don't have to trust in God. We have found our own ways. And what Abram is going to show us is the perfect example of a person who says, no, my God is my security. And when he falters in that belief, we see things go wrong. But when he holds fast to it, we see that his place, the people that he is developing, that he's the leader of, become a place of security for the people who come and dwell among them. That there's a peace and a security that comes by taking refuge in our God, in choosing obedience, in walking according to his ways. You see, Proverbs 18:10 says this, the name of the Lord, and this isn't just the name. I know I keep saying that, but we have very much diminished what it means to call on the name of the Lord in our society. It is his character, who he has revealed himself to be, and us taking refuge in that and saying, I delight in who you are, my God, and I want to live and walk according to your ways. That's what it means. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are protected. All of our lives are going to be found with us facing all kinds of different changes and circumstances that we can't predict. We lose a job. We have a sickness that develops or a disease that comes up. Some uncertainty comes about in your life that you weren't planning on. Persecution comes up. Even death. Losing loved ones. All of these are circumstances that we're going to face. And in those moments, those who choose faith, those who choose to rest in God's promises, those who choose to believe him despite what the circumstances appear to be, are the ones who will rest and dwell securely, for they find shelter in the Lord their God. You see, faith or obedience on our part brings security because it brings us into the presence of our God. That's why we choose obedience and faith, is because we want to walk closer with him. And in doing so, we find that he protects us. Like Abraham, faith is something that you and I have to choose. It doesn't just happen. It's not passive. It's a striving. It's pursuing. It's acting obediently. It's seeking to accomplish great things for the sake of God and trusting that he provides and protects us when the circumstances seem to tell us you should compromise and do something a different way. But our God is the one that we get to rest securely in. I'm going to ask the band to go ahead and come back up. But our God is our protector. I want us to take a few moments just as we wrap up and spend time in prayer with one another. For some of you, you may never have actually even stepped into that of wanting to choose and pursue faith, and I'd be more than happy to have that conversation of what faith really looks like. A costly faith. Not a faith of just not wanting the negative consequences of not following God, but a faith that actually sees who our God is and delights in Him and wants to pursue Him. If you would stand with me, I have a couple of prayer prompts. We'll spend a few moments praying together as a church, and I'll be down here if you wanted to pray with me. And then Toby will lead us in a song, and we'll close out. But Father, thank you that your promises are always true, and we can trust you. Jesus, thank you for earning our place with God so that we can obey out of faith and not fear. And Spirit, draw us nearer and nearer to our God, that we may find security in your presence. Let's spend time just praying through these things.